Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get into this week's show. Friends, lovers, listeners, happy Wednesday, happy hump day, and happy Sex on the Peach day. This is the last Sex on the Peach that will air during Pride Month, and I think today is a very important episode. As we all know, in our society, gender identity and expression are topics of growing importance and understanding. The experiences of transgender and non-binary individuals, whilst rich and diverse, are often misunderstood and overlooked. Today, I am genuinely so very honoured to be joined by my friend Radclyffe Baker to discuss their personal journey as a member of the trans and non-binary community after being assigned female at birth. In this episode, we're going to dive into their experiences. We'll be discussing their challenges and triumphs that they've faced, the importance of representation and visibility, and how we can all contribute to a more inclusive and understanding world. We, of course, explore the journey of embracing our true self, the impact of societal attitudes, and the importance of allies in the fight for equality and recognition. Thank you so much for all of your questions that were sent in for today's episode. I truly learned and took away so much from today's conversation with Radclyffe, and I am in awe of how articulate and also how gracious they are when discussing the lack of understanding that still very much persists. I really hope for anyone in the trans or non-binary community, or for anyone currently questioning their gender identity, that this episode provides a very safe space for you, and for anyone else who wants to learn to be a better friend, a better ally to those in the trans and non-binary communities, that you take as much from this episode as I did, and that it inspires you to want to learn further. Pride Month isn't just glitter and rainbows. It exists for a reason, and the struggle for equality and acceptance is unfortunately still very much ongoing, especially so for the transgender community, who face an abhorrent amount of injustice and discrimination. It is no small feat to come and speak as openly and vulnerably as Radclyffe has today, and I am forever grateful to them for letting us in the way they have today. So, let's get into it. Here is Pride and Prejudice. Radclyffe, thank you so much for joining me on Sex on the Peach today. I am very, very grateful to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It goes without saying that I know how vulnerable it is to come and speak publicly and openly about just being a person in the trans community, because we all know that the country is fucking dumpster fire. That's it. I'm going straight in. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. So on behalf of myself and anyone listening, I appreciate you coming here to talk about this so much. So I just want to make that very apparent before we even get into things. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. I'm just I'm just glad to be along for the ride.
This will also be a learning conversation for me and a learning conversation for anyone who is listening, who will never know the ins and outs of someone's lived experience until we hear it. It's amazing to have you here, and I have wanted someone to feel comfortable enough to come and speak to me. So I'm very grateful that it is you.
Hey.
And I guess maybe we should just start at the very beginning. What has been your journey so far?
In terms of realizing transness as an element of my identity,
Yeah.
I think it was only when I was about 20,
Okay.
19 or 20, which feels quite late considering how very obvious it is now. But that usually is the way.
Right. Okay.
You spend so long hiding parts of yourself from yourself, and then you look back and go, I see all of these clues that were really, really obvious to me.
Yeah.
And the same can be said of a lot of queer identities, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You spend so long lamenting the fact that you didn't see it sooner, but that's part of the journey. I came out as non-binary about that same time. I sort of had the momentous wave of realization, then told everyone. Then I think I only went down the medical transition route in 2021, so I will have been 23. And the whole UK system of healthcare is really confusing, to say the least, and horrendous at best.
Right. Okay.
No, horrendous at worst. Well, either way.
Yeah, I was going to say, as much as I say, well, it also wouldn't surprise me in keeping with so many other things in this country.
Yeah, it's just messy.
Someone has actually sent in a question. I'm worried about facing discrimination in healthcare. What has been your experience with healthcare providers? So it's probably an apt time to ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first went down the healthcare route, it took a lot of research initially just because I was so nervous about even considering it. There are so many horror stories around detransitioners, and you think, oh God, am I going to make really, really awful changes to my body that are going to affect me permanently and I'll be disfigured? And it's all scaremongering.
I was just going to say the amount of scaremongering in general. And also I think there's an account on Twitter of someone who did detransition, and the vitriol they now seem to have towards trans people is very nonsensical to me.
There are lots of detransitioners who have very measured responses to it, but I find this may be a rather devil's advocate thing to say, but I think that a lot of detransitioners find a lot of wealth in belittling trans experience. It's a very commercially viable route to go. Ollie London being a fantastic example of someone who first off went down the transracial route of getting surgery to look like a K-pop star, and then realizing, oh, I think I am a trans woman, and is now perhaps one of the most vocal and I think dangerous detransitioners out there.
That's actually the account I was referring to.
There we go. Funded very, very, very healthily, I would say, by the far right in America.
Right.
It's hugely profitable. But when I went to my doctor, it was quite funny, actually. I was in a little village outside of Cambridgeshire because I'd spent a little bit of time between houses. And I found this old man who was in a blues band, and I stayed in his spare room in this little village. And this little doctor in this tiny, tiny surgery really wanted to help me. And I said, I'm non-binary and I would like to get access to the gender identity clinic, whichever is nearest to me. That was the one in London, but there are regional locations for most people throughout the UK. That's not the best system, but we won't get into that just yet.
Sure.
And in the referral letter to the gender identity clinic, she wrote, Radclyffe is a trans man, which was incorrect, and also wishes to remove her breasts, which is just wrong on every count. I laugh at it, but it is a bit silly because not only did she not listen to me in terms of non-binary, but she also didn't listen to me in terms of pronouns, which she had herself assumed. From start to finish, there's just a lack of understanding and education.
Yeah.
If someone misgenders me, I don't particularly mind because as a non-binary person, I understand that it's confusing. But if their intention is good, if they are well-intentioned, then I have no real issue. It's when it's willful that it's a bit concerning. But to move on, in the UK, I'm not the first person to have spoken about this, and I will not be the last. To see a doctor for a specialist to get a referral, you have the right to be seen within 18 weeks.
Right.
That's whether you're a trans person seeking medical healthcare or you have a real bad issue with your lower back and you need to see a specialist. You have the right to be seen within 18 weeks.
Okay.
At the moment, my referral was put in 2021, and I still haven't had a first appointment in 2024. It is very likely that I will not have one for another 5 years. And that is on the lower end of the scale. So,
my gosh.
Yeah, it's not a good system. I was very, very fortunate because I went to university and I have pretty much used most of my student loan to pay for private healthcare.
Yeah.
Which is just something that most people will not have the opportunity to do. And also, I'm white, and therefore I face less racism in the medical scene.
Right.
And that is just a fact. But as of today, it has been today is my anniversary of top surgery.
Oh my gosh. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. It's very, very exciting. 1 year anniversary of top surgery, and I've been on T for 2.5 years.
Amazing. Because I remember when we did the last concert at Above the Stag to
Rest in peace.
I know, R.I.P. But, grateful that we were their last hurrah.
And what a wonderful evening that was.
And it was a gorgeous evening. And that was also to raise money for top surgery.
Yeah.
What a great way for them to go out, actually, I'm going to say.
I think so, yeah.
And a couple of people have actually sent in questions about hormone therapy and surgery. So there's two that are relatively similar. So I'll pop them both together and then we can sort of talk about them as a combination.
Yeah, sure.
One person has sent in, what has your experience been like with hormone therapy or surgery? How did you decide what steps to take and what was the process like? And the second one was, I'm considering starting hormone therapy, but I'm nervous about the changes. Can you talk about your experience with hormones, both physical and emotional?
So when I was doing the initial research, a lot of it was YouTube videos of influencers and trying to see sort of visual changes.
Right, okay.
To see whether that would be something that would work for me or something that would not. I think I've settled now into this sort of camp male aesthetic that I seem to sort of have going. I'm very short, so I don't really pass. But I don't think that the height is really the thing. I think that I just have a massive ass, and that's fine.
Me too, baby.
Yeah.
It's the big booty gang.
Yeah, the big booty gang is real. And I don't foresee that changing for a while. Hormones will not change the ass. There's this whole thing around fat redistribution, which I was hoping for. I was really hoping that the fat redistribution would change the size of the ass. And it does for some. But when you are gifted in the rear, as I am, it will not happen. The biggest fear that I had was this talk of the emotional change.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, you'll go on testosterone and you'll never cry again. Or you'll go on testosterone and you'll become so angry.
Right.
And I think really none of that has been true for me. It may be true for some people. I would say as a teenager, I was a very, very angry, resentful person.
Okay.
I'm sure that a lot of that has to do with personal histories and perhaps just the struggle of growing up.
Sure.
But I always thought of myself as a very angry person.
Right. That surprises me so much.
Yeah. I was quite violent. I wasn't taught how to regulate what I felt.
Sure.
I lashed out all the time.
Right.
The biggest change in that was therapy. I have had therapy for a long time, and I did that before I even considered going on hormones. This was years and years ago. That calmed me down. Then, having been on T for 2.5 years, I feel the calmest I have ever really felt.
That's amazing.
I think a lot of that being the dysphoria isn't so all-consuming anymore.
I was gonna say, do you just feel more at home in your own body and in your mind as well?
And of course, you would be terrified of being even angrier than you are right now when you are really struggling and battling with yourself to feel like you are a cohesive being from the get-go.
Yeah.
I'm in a very, very calm place. And I think even the hardest days I have now, I have maybe a portion of the anger or desperation that I would have felt at least 5 years ago. So that has very much been the opposite of what people were talking about, which has been a huge relief.
Especially because I think it would be absolutely fair to be angry at the world because of how poorly people in the trans community are treated. So it would almost even make more sense for people to be more angry because people are not just being allowed to live, you know, and that is very anger inducing. I mean, it makes me angry for sure.
Yeah, it would be understandable.
It would be understandable. So I think the fact that it has had the effects it does speak volumes. I think that would be really comforting for people to hear as well.
Yeah. I'm sure that there'll be other people that will have had a slightly different experience.
Of course.
But
it's one experience.
From the get-go, it's been a good thing for me. I think the one major change is that I don't cry as much.
Right.
That may just be because there are fewer things that make me sad now.
Sure.
So I can't look back and count quantitatively of the amount of times that I have cried or not cried, but I feel less of an urge to.
Yeah.
Again, that could just be because I'm not as sad now.
Yeah.
So, listener, take that as you will.
Would you also, I think there will be a lot of listeners probably not understanding or knowing anything about how the hormones work. Would you mind explaining a little bit for anyone listening so that people understand how that works? Because there will just be a lot of people who just don't know.
So I went through the private route, which is, to go on a tangent, a shame because the NHS should be there to be that for us. And it was expensive.
Yeah.
I'm not anymore. I am now on the NHS through something called a bridging prescription.
Okay.
So I have not yet had my gender identity clinic appointment in which a gender specialist will talk to you and say, how do you feel? How long did you feel this way? And all of these sorts of questions that a cis person probably has never even considered.
And I hope they're not giving it, are you sure? You know,
I mean,
but I can see that happening.
It has, and it probably will continue to. But in terms of what I am currently experiencing with hormone replacement therapy, is I use a topical gel, which is applied to skin. There are other types, such as injection. That's not the type that I take, but they both work the same way in that they provide testosterone to a female body and allow for masculinizing effect, which, depending on the dosage, can take a very, very long, slow time, or can be quite fast. So the long and slow method is the microdosing. This is often what non-binary people will choose, but not always.
Sure.
So microdosing allows for small changes, very, very, very gradual. For someone who is probably more of a trans man identity, they would likely choose to go with their doctor. The doctor will do all of this numbers stuff. It would be more of a higher dose and the changes would come in a little bit faster.
Because they'd want to get to that end goal.
Yeah, they probably are looking for more of that facial hair and the voice deepening much, well, I wouldn't say faster because it will still take a really long time.
Of course,
so in the scale of years, is it really fast? But you know, time can fly.
I had no idea that there was a gel. I would have presumed everything was injection. So that's really interesting to know, because for a lot of people, they don't want to inject themselves.
Yeah, that's what I think I was personally scared of.
Yeah.
I'm not scared of injections per se, but I think I was more very concerned by the idea of having a sharps kit and needing to dispose of needles at a pharmacy. And that sort of thing felt, ooh, that's quite real. And this gel felt like a real way to sort of, in a sort of holistic way, it sort of is like I'm massaging the self-love into me every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It works for me.
It is good that there are different options, because I do think that if it was just injections, that might be enough to completely put some people off doing it at all, because I do think, you know, that's a bit of a jarring thing. Have you ever come across anyone in the trans community working in healthcare in your journey?
I can count them on one hand.
Right.
Yeah, certainly from the journey I've taken, there have not been many. There are some fantastic healthcare services that are led, I think, by trans people. I've not been lucky enough to use them, but
sure.
Yeah, even some of those people on that one hand that I've been counting them on were not even people that I've met through my journey, but just people that I have met in sort of different contexts. Mm-hmm. So not with my personal healthcare, but, at a drag night or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it seems that it is a space, as are all, because the space hasn't been made for people in the trans community. But when there are so many more people questioning their gender identity and their own home in their body, then we have any real awareness of the fact that there is so little representation of different gender identities within the healthcare space. I can only imagine is really, really damaging. And that's not to say, like, I believe myself to be a person of empathy and inclusivity and understanding.
Yeah.
But I still don't have the lived experience. It's the same way I would never come on this podcast and talk about what it's like to be a trans person, because I will never know and I won't have that experience. So that's not to say there aren't some wonderful people working in healthcare that won't be empathetic and understanding and deal with things in the right way. Mm-hmm. But it's quite simply not the same as having people with that experience and with that knowledge of what someone is physically and emotionally about to go through.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if I'd gone to a small little village doctor that had a non-binary doctor, there is no way that the doctor would then have said, Radclyffe is a trans man and she wishes to cut off her breasts. It's like that just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And that's on my record in the files of the doctor having said that. And it's just sort of a record of a joke.
And a lack of respect.
Yeah, and I don't even think that she meant it.
Yeah.
But, what can you do?
I'm in my 30s now and had grown up unaware in terms of pronouns. I think for so many people, it is just like a force of vernacular habit. And I've caught myself absolutely and hold my hands up. But I'm also not afraid of apologizing and saying, I'm so sorry, and immediately recorrecting myself. And like you said, it's a matter of intention. But I would like to think that when we're looking at professional spaces, healthcare, that shouldn't be happening. Yeah. There should be adequate training in place to make sure that people are handling people's identity and people's gender with sensitivity and with respect.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Because they probably just have expected people to try their best.
Yeah.
And so if that person hasn't had much experience with people in the trans community, they're just writing things off and not even thinking about it. And I don't think that's acceptable, because it's not treating people with the respect that they deserve.
Yeah, exactly. I've just realised I haven't spoken about the surgery question.
I was actually going to ask about, how did your surgery go? How have you felt since? Happy 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
A lot to celebrate. But yeah, how was your experience with it?
The impetus that pushed me to think about properly getting surgery was the fact that I'd been binding.
Okay.
For those who don't know, binding is the process of compressing breast tissue so that your chest looks flatter. You can do this a number of ways. The way that I bound was a sort of vest. If you imagine a crop top, but it's got a very tough front. Sort of feels a little bit like layers of cardboard.
Is that painful? Uncomfortable?
That's an interesting question. It wasn't uncomfortable.
Okay.
Because the comfort that I found in having a flatter chest actually felt better.
Right.
Which is so wild. But I was binding so much that I was doing major damage to my body. And there'll be a lot of trans people who will have experienced the same thing of just finding so much comfort that you forget to take breaks. You're only supposed to really wear a binder for maximum 6 to 8 hours for a time. I was wearing them a lot longer. You are supposed to have off days where you rest and relax, but when you can't really do anything without binding, it becomes just this is my outfit and this is what I wear. This is my armor against the world.
And once you start doing it, I'm sure it's really hard to go out without.
It is, because you feel that first sense of euphoria of, oh my goodness, look at this flat chest. That's amazing. And then you just don't stop. But the dangerous thing that can come with it is like any sort of compression. This is the talking point of the famous transphobe J.K. Rowling of, this is what trans men are doing. They are destroying their bodies. This is a form of self-harm. And in a way, the form of self-harm comes in the absolute desperate need to continue it.
Yeah.
And I did do damage to my lower back, and I still have issues for it.
Right.
In that I was binding so much, and the binder that I was using was not compressing the front side of my body. It was pulling on the back.
Right.
So the compression came around the back of my body and was sort of pulling the two sides together, like a sort of corset.
Sure.
So the tension comes in the back. And that did mean that I was hurting my back. So then I thought, well, I've been doing this for so many years now. I think the next step is just to get rid of them. There are some non-binary people, specifically, even some trans men, who are absolutely okay with that sort of duality of sometimes binding, sometimes not.
Okay.
I just didn't want them.
You weren't, yeah.
I never felt comfortable sharing them. Sex became really difficult because it was at the point where I was sort of like, well, I don't even know if I can have sex without the binder. And then you're getting breathless mid-sex. It's not good. So the amount of binding as well flattened the tissue that I had as well. So the fact that I had them, they just then became really saggy.
Sure.
And I was a double D.
Right. Wow.
So there was quite a lot to work with.
Sure.
And they looked as sad as I felt.
Sure.
So I went to a consultation with a private surgeon. I went through the whole process. I needed to get letters of recommendation from medical professionals. That could include a psychotherapist, can also include some very specific people of a list that I can't remember now, so I won't say before I get it wrong. And then gave that to the surgeon. And my original date was only supposed to be November last year. Mm-hmm. It got to the point where I went through the worst breakup of my life in March last year. It was awful. Right. And I was living with them.
Okay.
And it all just felt very overwhelming. And I thought, there is no way that I'm going to make it through this year to wait till November. So with the help of crowdsourcing and the fundraiser that you were so wonderfully a part of, community care, that's where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fundraising and a personal donation from a very good friend, whom I will pay back. I was able to get surgery, and it's only through the kindness of others that I've been able to do that.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by wonderful people. The recovery was shockingly fast, and
okay.
Don't tell my surgeon this, but I was on a scooter the day after. Not the day after. I was on
bed rest.
Yeah, I was on a scooter, I think 2 days after. My best friend had come over.
What were you supposed to be doing?
I was supposed to be in bed. But my really good friend had come to look after me. She was anticipating me being spaced out, completely unaware, sleeping for a week. And there I was, inviting friends over, going, I'm going to cook dinner. But I think the joy of having the freedom was just
took over.
It absolutely, I was so beyond happy. And I still I still catch myself today sort of going, oh, I've forgotten to put my binder on.
Wow.
And realizing,
you don't have to.
I don't need to. Isn't that great?
And your body must just feel so much freer for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to be better at the stretches because I still have the issues from the back there, but I don't slouch as much. Before, it was very much a doubled over kind of situation of people thinking that, hunching will make them less obvious, but it never really does, but you still do it anyway. Now I'm definitely making better choices for my body.
That's amazing. Was it painful?
Not at all, really.
Wow.
But I think I'm just quite lucky in that respect because not everyone has it so easy. But
I think that is positive because I think, as we know, in terms of trans issues, there's so much scaremongering out there.
Yeah.
So I think to hear that someone has gone through top surgery and it was as pain-free and quick healing as possible will be a really, really positive thing for someone to hear.
There was some bruising. And for a while, so some surgeons will offer different things.
Okay.
There are a few different types of surgery that you can get. If you have very, very small breasts, you can get something that's, I think, called like a lollipop, which is just sort of like they scoop in from the nipple. They do a little line underneath the nipple and then scoop out from that hole.
Wow. Okay.
Which is minimal scarring.
Sure.
That is not the reality for many trans people. I had a double incision with nipple graft.
Wow. Okay.
A lot of surgeons will offer the nipple graft for free.
Okay.
So they cut all along the bottom, not necessarily like right underneath the bottom of the breast, but they certainly, you will see big influencers, trans guys on Instagram will often show their shirtless bodies. You'll be able to see that they're quite large. Mine go all the way down to beyond the back of my armpit. That's how large my breasts were.
Right. Okay.
Slightly further back on my left side than my right side. You would think that would be extremely painful.
Yeah.
It really, really wasn't. The surgeon will have a team that will look after you and make sure that you have all the drugs you need. The standard recovery time is 6 weeks. I think that I was really up and moving within 4.
Right.
Up and like active.
Well, I beg to differ. You were up and scooting within 2 days.
Yeah, it was really not very sensible of me. Everyone will have some kind of bruising because, of course, that's just how your body deals with it. But again, I don't know, it must have just been like my incredible genes or something, but like, the bruising had cleared up within a matter of weeks. And when I went for my follow-up, which I think was 2-3 weeks after the surgery, they took the compression vest off after 2 weeks, I think, and you sort of go, oh my gosh, that looks really awful. But no, it was surprisingly already like yellow,
right?
Which is a really quick healing for a bruise for surgery. I think the scariest thing was the nipple grafts.
Okay.
There's not always a guarantee that they will stay.
Oh, right. Okay.
Can be a bit alarming.
Sure.
You think, oh, I'm going to, chop off my nipples and hope that they reattach on a different place. But the scariest thing about it was that they did look really dead for a while. But that is literally because the skin cells on the top are dead and they are dying.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff underneath that really matters.
Yeah.
So that was the scariest part. And I did sort of panic thinking, oh gosh, what if they don't stay? And I'll maybe one nipple will stay and I'll just be one nipple guy and that'll be the worst thing. But no, they are absolutely fine.
Gorgeous. They're back and thriving.
Yeah. Back and thriving. Yeah.
I'm sure that's made a huge difference to your confidence, your sexual confidence now, not binding.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah. I'm able to be naked in front of a person, and that is crazy. I would never, ever have expected that, but I can, and that's a really gorgeous thing.
Was it uncomfortable to have sex with the binding on?
It helped to alleviate the dysphoria of whatever position you're in. There's going to be some bounce back.
Yeah.
And so the binder helped reduce that to a certain extent, but at the same time, it then sort of felt like this whole constriction around you.
Yeah.
If you're not skinny, if you're on any kind of fat spectrum, anyone who isn't super, super skinny is going to have a whole load of extra fat accumulating from underneath the binder that sort of pops out, which makes you feel really unattractive.
Another thing that we can blame society for.
Exactly. The whole internalized fat phobia of going, oh, I don't fit into this. It's not going to make anyone feel great or at their sexiest. But as an interim measure between feeling dysphoria and top surgery, it was helpful because it did make you, or at least it made me feel a bit more in control of a body part that I really didn't feel in control of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Obviously, you said you went through a breakup. Someone has sent in a question saying, have you ever had to deal with rejection or lack of understanding from anyone that you care about? So that might not be related in any way at all, but obviously you mentioned that happened at quite a pivotal time. So I guess that all ties in. Have you felt supported by people along the way? Have you ever felt rejection from anyone that's sort of like close in your life?
In terms of the breakup, they are non-binary too.
Sure.
It felt a lot easier to be intimate with someone who kind of knew what I was going through and also knew what words to say and what words to avoid.
Yeah.
Which is, important to talk about before you even start having sex, but is helpful as a sort of implicit knowledge to begin with. I now am dating a wonderful cis woman. We talk a lot about the language and what's okay and what's not. And it's fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun to talk about, I wonder whether this would be good or whether this word is not good. I mean, it's maybe perhaps an intellectual way to think about sex at this moment in time. But
listen, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, right. But I always thought that for me, I would only ever be able to be intimate with another trans person because no one would ever understand.
Yeah.
But that was the fear talking.
Yeah.
So now dating this wonderful, wonderful woman, she just gets me because she listens.
That's gorgeous. I love that.
Yeah, it's really good. And I only hope that I listen to her as much as she listens to me.
Being with someone in the non-binary community to being with a cis woman, that must be a different experience. But, I'd like to think if you are dating someone who is from a marginalized community, I know that I would want to do everything in my power to make them feel comfortable and confident and supported.
Yeah.
I love to hear that. And I'm very glad to hear that there are people out there listening and communicating, because it's all I advocate for.
Yep,
no matter what relationship you're in, I'm always like, you should all be communicating and listening to each other.
Yeah.
So that's gorgeous. I'm so happy. I'm really, really happy to hear that. Going back to the question, have you found that most people in your life have been supportive? Have you had to face any kind of lack of understanding, I suppose? Or
there will always be people who aren't willing to listen.
Yeah.
There will always be people who are willing to listen but don't understand it and therefore make mistakes. Again, that comes back to intention of if they mean well, I'm very much of the opinion that I'm not going to shout down their throats and go,
sure,
how dare you? Because that then makes people feel very defensive and they won't try again.
It shuts down the conversation. It sort of closes the door, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I have had very difficult relationships with family members.
Okay.
Who haven't had, I wonder whether it's the will or the ability to understand. I think my mother was worse about queer thing.
Okay.
She just doesn't get this non-binary thing.
Sure.
And so it doesn't really come up and I won't talk about it.
Yeah.
That may be fear on my part because she was so bad as a teenager. But I think as well, the intensity of teenagehood, everything felt worse.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm misremembering how dramatic it all felt, but, it's been easier.
Do you feel supported by your family now?
Not about the transness as such.
Right, okay.
So when you came to see the play...
Radclyffe has written a beautiful play called Sweet Testament Divine, which I got the pleasure of seeing just on Sunday, about the 1930s, isn't it?
Yeah, 1930s.
Yeah, a trans man's experience in the 1930s. And I got to watch a rehearsed reading of it on Sunday. It was glorious. The plan is to be an audio play?
Yes, well, the audience experience was really positive. They thought, yes, I can see that. I can hear it in my mind's eye, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Hear it in my mind's eye. That's all kinds of wrong. I can see it and I can imagine that on Radio 4. I got a lot of that.
100%. Yeah.
So that is absolutely the plan, is to keep going with the audio play route. But a lot of people were also talking about making it more accessible to be on stage so that people can see it in all of its forms. I think I would probably make it a little bit longer if it was a stage play. There is so much in that play that can be explored. But
it's set in a completely different time. But unfortunately, there's so many things that we can see that, in terms of the lack of understanding, especially, that unfortunately are still mirrored today.
Yeah, it deals with the scarcity of transgender healthcare, the lack of knowledge around transgender healthcare, the necessitation of self-medication, the rise of fascism, difficulty with family members, which will always be a difficult thing because people are people and they are used to things being the way they are. Change is difficult.
And here we are almost 100 years later and the majority of those things are still the same.
Yeah, it is upsetting.
Yeah.
And I think that's what drove me to write the play. But at the same time, the characters in the play all have their own journeys.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, they're different. just as people in my own personal life have grown.
And your family were there on Sunday also?
Yeah, they were.
Watching.
I was very nervous.
How did they take away from things like
this? Was sort of me opening up to my mother about being on testosterone, which I was really nervous about because we just avoided the issue. But she can see that I have facial hair. She can hear that my voice is different. It's just the sort of unspoken understanding between us that we don't really discuss it. The same with my brother. He's a revert to the Islamic faith, and I think that it would have just been a bit too difficult for him.
Okay.
Yeah, he was invited, but I think we are on very different spaces. We all had a bit of a difficult upbringing, and lots of different things bring peace to different people.
Yeah.
And for him, his faith in Allah is one of them. That's not for me, but I really want to respect it for him. The difficulty is that I don't necessarily think he respects that allowing my transition and following the love of my transition has been partly what's brought me peace. My mother, in the same mouthful, will watch a whole play that I've written about trans man, know that I use they them pronouns, and still say, oh, isn't this marvelous? And then she heard me all the way to everyone that was at the theatre, which, you know,
okay,
I am just grateful that she's not calling me slurs anymore. That is progress in its own way. You know, so whilst we still haven't made it to radical acceptance of I love you no matter what you are, she does love me, or some element of what she thinks is me.
Yeah.
And she's growing in that way. And I can't push anyone to learn faster.
Yeah. But there has been progress.
Yeah, there's been progress, and that's what matters. I think my sister is very good at correcting my mother, and I never will. Sure. I think that's just another example of how cis people can show up for trans people, because the trans people don't want to have to correct people all the time. And if there's someone that doesn't have to do it for every single person they meet, and they do hear someone misgendering a transgender person, then they can speak up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a lot of weight to feel like you are the bearer of bad news. Whenever someone misgenders you, you're like, oh, sorry, I actually use, and I get so in my head around being annoying.
People shouldn't be made to feel like they are needy for just being referred to in the correct way. Like, there is one company that I work for, and at one point they had one non-binary employee who no longer works there because they said the company wasn't inclusive enough. And what I then heard after they left was people say, oh, she doesn't know what she was talking about, it's fine. And I was like, how can you not see the irony in what you are saying? This person, the only person in that community is saying you're not inclusive enough, then it means one thing, and it means you aren't inclusive enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not even having the respect to say they were saying this. And half the time when they were working there, I would hear other people say she this, she that, and I was constantly like they.
Yeah.
Because it's infuriating. And then you're going to say, we are inclusive. And I'm going to say, I think you were box ticking so that you could say we have a non-binary employee, because all you've done is hire a non-binary person. You haven't put anything in place to cater for anything that they need whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's certainly a parallel to be drawn of, you know, the nagging wife, in that an inept husband who is adamant that his wife is nagging him need only take out the bins, and the nagging, as he puts it, will go away. It is just another example of an annoying person is only annoying because they are brave enough to advocate for what they need.
Yeah.
I'll put my hands up and say, I am not brave enough to ask for what I need. And so having someone who will do that for you is a lifesaver often.
And I think that the term nagging literally is something made up by people who literally can't hold themselves accountable for just not doing what they fucking should be doing in the first place.
Yeah, nagging is a word made up by people who refuse to do the work.
Someone had said, what can allies do to support the trans community better? And I guess that is one thing, you know, that we can say. Obviously, if you've got other things to add, then please do. There might be specifics we might not know that we can do to help, but I also don't think it's fair to lay all of the responsibility on the people in the community to spoon feed everyone what they need to do, because I don't personally think it takes a genius that if someone is like, these are my pronouns, to correct someone if they aren't using them, you know. I don't think that someone in the community should have to say to people, please, can you do this for me? I think that's something that we can all just take some initiative and do. But yeah, someone has said, what can allies do to support the trans community better? So, you know, I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the first one is very much so correct pronouns when you hear people using the wrong ones, because as we've just said, it really is. It works to stop the alienation of the trans person.
Yeah.
If the trans person is the only one ever talking about how people use the wrong pronouns, of course that will come across as a broken record. So you taking some of that weight so that they can do the actual stuff that they're there to do, like do their job, will be really helpful. In terms of other things that people can do, I would say that trans people are as varied and different as everyone else.
Yeah.
So they all have different needs.
Yeah.
Checking in on trans people that you know, trans friends, trans acquaintances, will fundamentally change their lives. Not just, oh, how are you doing today? I know that the political situation is really dark, because that can be quite demoralizing. But saying, hey, do you want to go out and do something fun?
So it's not all coming off the back of yet another negative statement or, you know, piece of legislation that's been put in place.
Exactly.
To keep it a positive experience, which is what it should be, because aren't we all just celebrating wanting to embrace ourselves?
Exactly. I think centering the love is always the important thing to do. So if you see a really awful bunch of headlines that have come out, yes, text your trans friends and acquaintances, but don't maybe talk about the politics of it and instead say, I know a really good ice cream shop, so let's go.
Yeah.
And just not finding distractions, but finding ways to make those positive experiences and memories. Because if that's not what we're on this planet for, then what is?
Then what for? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a cop-out for me to say, oh, just, you know, ask the people in your life what they need, but they will be able to tell you what they specifically need in that time much better than I can.
Yeah.
So anyone on their trans journey will be in a different place to me.
And I think anyone going through anything difficult in life, it's in our nature to check in and be like, is there anything I can do to help?
Yeah.
And you go through a breakup, you have good days, you have bad days. You go through any significant life alteration.
Exactly.
It's always an emotional roller coaster. You're up one day, you're down the next. And it requires a support system. It requires people to check in. And I think the thing is, there's a lack of support by the macro community. That's what's difficult, you know, because we can all check in on each other about our breakups and stuff like that. But the world isn't saying it's bad that we've had a breakup. Anyone who is on a transitional journey, they have people like J.K. Rowling telling them it's wrong. They have like huge public figures basically saying you don't deserve to exist in this way. So it's like you do have that outside societal pressure to deal with that. The most of us, when we're just going through an alteration in our lives, that's not going to be the case. I was saying in my last episode when I was talking to Taz that my parents bought their first ever house from a trans woman. And this was in the 1980s. And they said she was amazing. She was the life and soul of the street and everyone loved her. And I was talking to my dad about it the other day and he said, it must have been so hard to be trans then, you know, in the 80s. And I said, I do agree to an extent. I'm sure it was an incredibly difficult thing to navigate because there wasn't the same community that there probably is now. However, as you've said, she was the life and soul of this street. Everyone loved her. You bought the house from her, stayed friends with her. You still saw her all the time. And she had this amazing community of friends. And it seemed like everyone supported her in that micro community. So I said I would also argue that whilst it would have been difficult back then because it just wasn't as, we weren't coming across it as commonly, social media didn't exist. And so you didn't constantly have to worry about opening up your phone and seeing something that is transphobic because you probably just existed in your community that you were in rather than having to constantly be on the receiving end of the phone, of social media. You know, it's sort of like, even in your own little micro communities, we don't live in them anymore. We constantly live in the macro community because it's at the end of our fingertips 24/7. And you just didn't have that information then. So whilst I think we have moved on and that more people are, I think, definitely feeling comfortable to go on a trans journey that maybe didn't then. And I think maybe that was forward at that time for someone to go on a full transitional journey. I do think we live in a different space now, and I don't necessarily think it's more or less difficult because we just are looking at the world in a different way, and people are constantly having to deal with backlash through public channels, which just didn't exist then.
It's really easy to tap into both the positive and the negative of it, but particularly in an election year.
Yeah. And I mean, we have literally the worst government.
Yeah, the whole using trans people as I guess a human shield for all the insidious stuff that they're trying to get through. Even something as important as the NHS is being hidden behind trans women as a threat.
Yeah.
And it's just nonsense stuff that they're trying to hide from the fact that they are just trying to privatize more healthcare. Yeah. And that is a double standard for me because I have used private healthcare, but I was pushed to do so.
Because there wasn't the support.
Because there was not the support, and it was a case of suicidal ideation or paying a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I just think that the NHS is such a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
And using trans women as a way to belittle the good work that the NHS can do should never, ever make sense to anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it plays on people's fears and the lack of education and goodness, men in dresses. But as the educator that I respect so much, Skylar, says, if there is a woman in a dress in a toilet, that is not a trans woman. It is a man in a dress pretending to be a trans woman.
Yeah.
Trans women are just
women.
And I know that can be a bit of a jumping point for someone who's never considered transness. And there's a whole, but they weren't born women, so that makes them a different type of woman. But so are black women, so are white women, so are cis women, so are trans women, so are any kind of woman that you can ever imagine. We all come from different places.
Yeah.
We will have different positionalities. This is what intersectionality is.
Yeah. Yeah.
To say that someone who cannot have children, as born a cis woman who cannot have children, is less of a woman is not a feminist talking point.
Yeah.
To use that as a way to say that trans women are not women is also not a feminist talking point.
Yeah.
And it really does just reduce a woman to body parts and what those body parts can do, as opposed to the beauty of a gendered experience and the choice of what kind of love you have for yourself and what journey you want to go on.
And I don't know how someone can call themselves a feminist and say women are great, but you can't be one.
No.
Like, the math ain't mathin'. Like, how can you rationalize that in your head and be like, the experience of a woman is XYZ, and like being a woman is all these wonderful things, but if you want to be one, tough shit, because you can't.
Yeah.
You know, right? It's just how anyone can rationalize those things in their head and be like, yeah, I'm going to say that with my whole chest.
It's baffling.
It's baffling. It's all these things that I'm like, these things that you're saying are nonsensical. And that's what's so frustrating, because you aren't bringing talking points to the forefront that sort of leaves space for valuable discussion, because everything you're saying does not make sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's the frustrating thing, is the conversation, you've reached that sort of stalemate because you can't, you can't argue with something that just doesn't make sense in the first place.
To fight nonsense with nonsense just makes more nonsense.
Exactly. Absolutely that. And well, someone has sent in, how do you manage to stay hopeful and proactive in a world that can sometimes be hostile to trans individuals?
That's a great question, and one that I really didn't know the answer to for a long time, because I wasn't very hopeful.
Sure.
Hence the aforementioned suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
I sometimes can get so wrapped up in this world, reminding myself that it's always kind of out to get me, and it's so difficult to be this or that.
Yeah.
But I ended up having to remind myself that it sounds really silly, but the taste of a sandwich and making a sandwich and those different components of a sandwich and eating the sandwich and going, oh, I see what these different components are. And bringing it down to just this, oh, I do have a mouth and I eat food. And sometimes I can recognize those flavors, and sometimes there are new flavors and I don't know what those are. But isn't it wonderful that I can do that? And that led me down a whole, I am nothing but a human.
Yeah.
And to find hope is very different than just being happy.
Yeah.
As I've mentioned before, I feel a lot of calm now. I feel a lot more level-headed. I feel happier.
Yeah.
Of course, one can't always be happy when...
No.
That wouldn't be normal. Anyway, if you were always happy, then...
You wouldn't appreciate being happy.
Exactly. We have emotions and we ride the waves and all of that for a reason. But the way that I ground myself is to remind myself that I am just another human.
Yeah.
And probably in, I don't know, 1,000 years, whatever happened in my brain is not going to matter. And sometimes that helps. Sometimes it makes me feel a bit powerless.
Sure.
But specifically to ground myself, it is just, why don't I try and find the most delicious food today? Or why don't I look at some nice colors in an art gallery or something and just remind myself that I have senses and I'm going to use these senses and to just experience the world, because everything else and the gendered experience of it doesn't have to matter in this exact moment.
Just let people live in the way that they want to, because at the end of the day, we are all just humans, no matter what part makes up our identity, whether that is race, gender, ability, sex. We're just people.
Yeah.
And we need to just let people live. We need people to go and taste food and go and look at beautiful colors,
It could be a really beautiful thing. It's just reminding yourself, maybe if you don't want other people to have those nice things, have you had those nice things?
Yeah.
Have you had a sandwich recently? Have you seen some nice colors recently? And if you haven't, start with that.
Yeah. And why are you so afraid of other people living authentically?
And then the question of how I stay active is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer is just that I kind of just have never, once I started, I never stopped.
Yeah.
I think transition has a lot to do with that, because I feel less noisy.
Yeah.
In my head, like that calmness again. And then just doing stuff.
And you are channeling it into art, into the play, and
it feels a bit generous to call it art, but
no, it's brilliant.
Thank you.
I loved it. I think like a lot, I hope that it does continue to go further, and I hope that people can hear it, can see it, whatever form it takes, because I think it is really important for people to see. It's almost like George Orwell's 1984, we read it and we're like, oh, hang on.
this feels a bit
This
real.
feels familiar. So I think like it's important for people to see things that are set in a completely different time period and realize how much work we still have to do. You know?
Well, the good news is I actually tomorrow I have a meeting with the National Archives. So I was writer in residence with them.
Yeah.
And I have a meeting with them tomorrow because they want to produce it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's super, super big news. And so maybe people will get a chance to see it.
Absolutely. Everyone keep an eye out for Sweet Testament Divine. That's very, very exciting. I do hope that we all get to hear and see more of it very, very soon. I think people need to see more art about the trans experience for sure, because I don't think enough exists. And also, as we personally discussed, when it has been in the past, it's generally always been portrayed by someone who is not in the trans community. So I think we all need to see more representation.
If you are interested in some really good art by trans people, I will recommend in this moment Travis Alabanza, Alok Vimenon, Abigail Thorne, and Kay Tempest. Those are my biggest inspirations.
Did they help inspire you to write your work?
I think just seeing other work will inspire me to write my own work.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are just some people that have really, truly inspired me.
As I said, this conversation will be a learning experience for me as well. So thank you for their recommendations. I will absolutely be checking them out because I want to engage more with voices in the trans community, in the non-binary community. I want to engage more with those voices and learn more about the lived experiences, because also the more we all know, the more we can educate other people, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Someone has said, have you ever felt overwhelmed by the process of transitioning?
Yes. There is so much admin to do. There's always so much admin to do. And I got in a bit of a sticky situation in 2022. Because I realized that when I did my deed poll, which is a change of name, which anyone can do, cis or trans, I realized that I had told every single organizing body except a certain DWP.
Right.
The Department for Work and Pensions. And so when I got to my second installment of student finance, it didn't come in. I was really, really hoping. I was waiting for it. I was like a little eager first year student. And then suddenly I found myself really, really poor because the DWP said, you are committing fraud. You're not who you say you are. You're claiming student finance and you don't exist. So there is always admin to do. And I spent about 6 weeks trying to prove that I did exist. Not even to mention the fact that you kind of have to become a healthcare professional in your own right to understand how the healthcare system works.
Yeah, I bet.
I have a whole book which is all about transgender healthcare in the UK. And I've read it cover to cover so that when you get into the meeting room with the doctor, you can advocate for yourself and say, I know how this system works.
And feel informed,
Be informed, and I know that you're saying no because you either are transphobic or you don't understand how it works and aren't willing to learn. I think that the necessity of educating yourself as a transgender person is kind of a curse, but I do think that it
benefits.
Maybe makes me think a bit more than maybe the average person might.
Sure.
I don't regret having to learn about all the stuff that I do know about, but it is like, well, what am I going to do with an intimate knowledge of the DWP civil servant system now?
And it is unfortunate because the rest of us don't have to do that.
Yeah, it meant that my second term of my first year of uni was mostly just me every day on the phone to another civil servant who didn't quite know what was going on, instead of actually focusing on my degree.
Right.
So that's just another example of how admin can be so all-consuming.
Yeah, and just the disparity.
Yeah. The way that I combat that was just by making a to-do list and being able to physically tick off something.
Yeah.
Even if it is as small as ring this number, then stop and have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
It's still something that you can tick off.
Absolutely. I'm a big advocate for a list. You know, if anyone I know, and if I feel anxious about anything, I'm like, make a list, even if it's like make the bed, put the smallest things on it, and just feel that accomplishment of ticking things off.
Absolutely. And I also am an advocate for just writing anything down, writing down feelings, writing down thoughts, worries, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And as a writer, that does tend to be a conduit for me to then write about something else.
Mm.
And that's often how stuff that I write just sort of gets made, in that it's just a bunch of word vomit onto a page that I then sort of filter through for the ideas. Not saying that you should always turn thoughts and worries into art, but I find that it's a good way to sort of whittle down what matters to you.
Mm-hmm.
And ask for help.
Yeah.
Whenever you can, ask for help.
Do you feel like you have a good support system now?
Yeah, and they are my friends are truly the best people that I could ever have been lucky enough to deserve. They're wonderful people, and I am so grateful every day.
Yeah.
But I think that also comes with, reminding yourself that friendship doesn't just sort of happen. You do have to put the work in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after the busiest period of my life, for a while, I think I now owe a lot of people a lot of cups of coffee.
That's gorgeous. I think we all need a support system. That makes me happy. I'm glad to hear that you have supportive friends and supportive partner. I think that's, a huge part of a positive experience.
Absolutely.
Someone has said, I've been questioning my gender identity for a while. What were some of the first signs for you that your assigned gender didn't fit? And how did you start to make sense of those feelings?
I think this is always going to be a bit of a tricky one because it's so personal. I went to an all-girls school.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. The weird thing was, it was kind of fine for me, in that it wasn't really that bad. Generally, the worst thing about it was that I just sort of didn't want to try. Yeah. And that was the hardest thing about it, which kind of doesn't make sense. So school as a thing was a great place to be. I never really felt like I didn't fit in.
Yeah.
And because it was a girls' school, everyone was having sex with each other. It wasn't not fun.
That wasn't happening at my all-girls school.
Well, and so I never really felt like that was a difficulty for me.
Yeah.
But there was one trans guy at the school who had an awful time.
Right. Okay.
And he knew a lot sooner than I ever did about any gender incongruence.
Wow.
And because the school was very strict, the dress code was very, very strict. It was skirts and skirts alone. I always sort of just thought I looked a bit frumpy in a skirt, and I didn't like it and didn't really care for it. But
sure,
I think that I was dealing with so much of my own stuff.
Yeah.
That I never had the time to look inwards and go, is that why I feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Or is it because actually I'm just not letting myself think? I had a whole load of other things going on in my brain at the time, and I never had the time for introspection. That came with getting my first job in a bookshop and realizing that there were other people in the world. I was very, very self-absorbed, as I said, very angry, very whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't a very nice person back then.
Right. That's so it's so hard to believe, having only known you for a couple of years.
Yeah. I think the kindest people often have the hardest journey to get there, right?
I would agree, yeah. I would agree.
It's easy to be kind when you have a lot, but when you don't have a lot, that kindness is there for a reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, I grew up in London, so you would be surprised that I wasn't quite aware of other people, but I wasn't. I didn't really like leaving the house very much. Anyway, I've learned what a trans person was quite late on. Didn't feel any kinship or understanding.
Sure.
I think that's because I'm not particularly binary trans. I'm very much on the sort of non-binary. Gender is less of an absolute.
Yes, yeah.
And so for the trans people that it did feel like an absolute, I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm not trans enough.
I hadn't even thought of that being a thought process, but of course.
Yeah.
People say trans woman, trans man. It's true. It does still lie in itself on a binary spectrum more often than not.
More often than not, yeah. And that's, I guess, just because that's the way that we've been taught to navigate the world is through those, through that binary.
Yeah. When people navigate bisexuality and they're like, I'm not one or the other. Maybe I'm actually just one because I'm not sort of equal, you know, so maybe I am gay. Or, you know, when I had a conversation with my friend Duncan about bisexuality, it's kind of like, if you tend to date the same gender, it's like, well, you're not bisexual then, you're just gay, or you're just straight.
Which is so infuriating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it's just one of those things, isn't it? Everyone is so desperate to have binary labels so they can make sense of something, because to just say something is fluid means that people can't make it tangible, make complete sense of it. Because I feel very much like if I have to choose a label, I always say I'm pansexual, because it's all encompassing as much as it can be. But I often am just like, I don't know, I'm just however I feel tomorrow, today, next week. Like, I don't know. Some days I wake up and I feel one way, and another day I wake up and I feel completely different. So what's the label for that? You know?
Exactly. And I think often people are a bit scared to leave something without a label, because the idea of something intangible is really scary.
Yeah.
But for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, well, for 2024 years, we have celebrated Jesus, you know, and the idea of God as this all-encompassing, intangible, everywhere and nowhere, all and nothing kind of existence. I'm not here to say that a gendered experience is a holy thing. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that humans are capable of understanding an idea.
Yeah, a concept.
And a concept of something that is maybe a Father, a Son, and a Holy Spirit at the same time.
Yeah.
What's that?
Something that we literally cannot reach.
Yeah. And so I don't think it is the hardest thing to imagine that there is something beyond a label.
Yeah.
We cannot see atoms with our tiny, tiny, insufficient eyes, but we know that they're there.
Yeah.
And I think that having that grace for someone's experience of, you've thought about this more than I have, so I guess you know yourself better than I do. If you find yourself questioning, where does that questioning come from? Is it that there is a certain aspect of the gender that you've been assigned that does not feel fits you? Is that because you feel like the gender that you currently sit in is being expressed in a different way than what you want it to be? Can you express the gender that you feel like you align with most is in that sort of ballpark, or are you somewhere elsewhere?
Yeah.
I always questioned where I stood in terms of butchness. I kind of just considered myself a lesbian for a long time, but I never really came out. And I think that was just out of pure laziness, really. I thought, well, I can't really be bothered to do that, so I won't do that just yet. And then I just never did. But I think that gender truly began to express itself in me after I started having very regular sex, I think.
Right.
Because the intimacy that it takes and the bravery you have to show another person a whole part of yourself that no one else really sees makes you see yourself in a different way, I think.
Yeah.
It certainly made me feel different, because I thought, oh, this is just how I see myself. And then other people saw me differently. And I went, oh, no, no, that's not how I feel. Why do you see that? I've never felt like that. And a lot of that was, I think, to give a concrete example, because that's quite nebulous, isn't it? The idea of gender play. If there is kind of like a role in a sexual encounter between two people, it was always just normalized for me that I would take on a bit more of a masculine role.
Okay.
But the moment that I realized that I was trans was, well, not the moment, but one of the moments that gave me another bit of, oh, maybe I'm trans, is that the partner that I had at the time saw that maskness as a role.
Right.
When I was very much a, Oh no. The maskness that I have is just very much part and parcel of me.
Sure.
But she'd gone down no, this is a kink gender play kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
When I was on a very different page.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so sex just became very strange.
Confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had sort of always thought that people just saw me as a bit masked, but then I realized that no, she just saw me as a butch lesbian that was pretending to sort of take on this male role.
Right. And that's like a sexual identity that you liked to encompass like during sexual play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I can play with that because
of course,
it's good to play.
Sure.
It's so important to play.
And to explore. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But the difference came when I realized that actually she thought that I was just acting this.
Yeah. And you were just being.
I was just being.
Yeah.
That will be different for other people. And I think the reason it took me so long is because I wasn't very self-aware for a really long time.
Yeah.
But if you find yourself questioning, and I've reached out to say I'm questioning, and what does that mean? Question the moments when you feel at your most vulnerable, which can be different for everyone, but for me, certainly was during sex. Yeah. And that opened up a lot of answers for me. Maybe it will.
I do also think, I mean, I know you say that you feel you came to it quite late. And I'm sure, you know, for some people, they do feel like they are on the trans journey when they are much younger. But I would say it almost makes sense that it did happen later, if you know, because I do think as kids we're so,
in the grand scheme of things, 20 odd isn't even that
no
late. Yeah.
Exactly that. But I was going to say, you know, as kids we are so indoctrinated to be one gender or another from the minute that a gender reveal is blue or pink, from the minute that a girl who enjoys sports is called a tomboy, from the minute it's a problem that a boy goes into a shop and chooses a Barbie instead of an army man. What was that doll called? G.I. Joe or whatever.
Something like that.
Our genders are so forced on us as kids that I think it's probably like so hard to really have that awareness until we're sort of out of the woods of that and we have our own space to think for ourselves and be like, no, actually, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I'm not just a tomboy. I'm not just feminine, you know, and actually think, no, this is something that genuinely doesn't sit right. It does not feel right. This is like not the right home for my body. But I do think childhood and the way our childhoods are presented to us in the world that we live in have a lot to answer for, because gender is such a forced construct. Even now we see the gender reveal and it's blue or pink. And I'm like, really?
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 In 2024.
Are we still doing this? You know, I still think it's still very forced. And the fact that a girl who does enjoy sports is called a tomboy. Well, no, she's just a girl who enjoys sport.
And that's all it should be.
And that's all it needs to be.
Yeah.
I definitely had a very girl-heavy childhood, from what I was wearing to the toys I was given to all of that stuff. And I think that worked for me. And that's how I've always felt at home in my body anyway. But even if I hadn't, I think you feel that you just sort of are going along with the gender constructs that are forced upon us from society, and even in school, you know, like the way you're treated in school in terms of like gender roles. You know, I remember being at secondary school and doing cooking. What?
Yeah.
They weren't just trying to hone women. They were like, no, we're going to hone the 1950s housewife narrative. So
what are you talking about? These are vital skills for any woman.
The boys were doing like design tech.
Yeah.
And like making bird houses out of wood.
You know, maybe that's why being at a girls' school for me was so unremarkable, because I did do design technology.
I did textiles as well.
Just it was never segregated by gender.
Yeah.
And so I never experienced that. And maybe that's probably partly why it wasn't so obvious to me for a while. But at the same time, I'm a dab hand at a needle and thread. So
same. Yeah. My primary school was all girls, but it was also a convent. So we were under heavy religious rule, if you will.
Yeah.
And the last question that that I've been sent in was, what's one piece of advice you wish someone had given you when you first started questioning your gender?
Great question. I'm trying to think back to how scared I was.
Yeah.
When I first started questioning my gender. it actually makes me think of the one of the first times I was looking up hormone replacement therapy. The stuff that it would do. This feels particularly pertinent as well because it played into my fears around changes around body and then sex as well.
Yeah.
In that, this may be a bit TMI, but one of the changes...
Nothing is TMI on this podcast, trust me.
Okay, great. One of the changes that can happen on masculinizing hormones is that your clitoris will enlarge.
Right, okay.
And I was terrified at the thought of this. I thought, there is no way that I want that happening to my body. No, thank you. I don't want that. That's really scary. But all of the other benefits of masculinizing, like the deeper voice and the facial hair, all of these things I wanted. So I thought, well, I don't really use that stuff down there that much. So what does it matter? And so I went down the process of hormones. Little did I know that it would become one of my favorite changes.
Oh.
And I absolutely adore it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so
you're like, I wish someone had told me you were gonna love your clit.
Right? It's wonderful.
That's I love that.
A lot of trans guys will call it the T-dick.
Okay.
Because it will grow into sort of what you might call a micro penis.
Okay.
That's not currently where I'm at because it's only been 2.5 years, but it does grow. And I think if I had been able to go back to where I was that 3 years ago, having an absolute panic about, oh my God, there's no way I could do this because that is horrifying. I don't want that. And say, follow the joy.
Yeah.
Right. I put off hormones for so long out of fear of change, of something unknown and scary affecting me. But my sex life has never been better.
I was gonna say, like,
yeah,
is there a huge shift in your sex life now?
Yes,
because you must feel more sexually confident, and as I would always say, you know, when we are at our most sexually confident, in my opinion, is when we have our best sex.
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. I am way more confident just in my general personhood.
Yeah. And
then to add a whole confidence around sex on that as well, I feel unstoppable.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I think consistently I found myself ruled by fear.
Yeah.
But really making the conscious choice to just slow down and then think about the really good things.
Yeah.
Is the best way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can feel like there are no good things.
Yeah.
But I bring it back to the sandwich.
Yeah.
And reminding yourself that you have some senses and try to just engage those senses. And that is a really wonderful thing.
Yeah. There's so much scaremongering. And I think that is like, I would like, you know, I hope any of my listeners who are allies of the world, hope anyone who listens to my podcast is an ally of every fucking community, because if not, you're in the wrong place. Like, this is not the space for you. But that's something that I have learned from our conversation today, that to support our friends in the trans community is to bring it back to the joy.
Yeah.
Is to make it a celebration, you know, because a lot of us have it easy if we're born into a body that feels like home, but to make sure that we celebrate those who aren't and those who have found a way to then live in a body that feels like home, that's a celebration. Like, when people find their self-empowerment, whatever that is, you know, and whatever journey that is, it is a cause for celebration. And I think that's like one of the most important things I've learned from our conversation today, is to support with joy and to support with celebration, and not always be like,
absolutely,
hey, is everything okay? You know, with a tone of, I know that the world is shite. Is to lead with joy.
Exactly. And I'm going to say some words. They don't belong to me. I don't remember who they were, but they were said to me a year or so ago, that with trans identity, a lot of it is all about dysphoria and how bad it can feel. But there is a word for the opposite called euphoria for a reason. It does exist. And to center the good feelings about a gendered experience. So when you feel like someone's gendered you the right way for the first time, that euphoric feeling, follow that and go, why did that feel so good? Instead of, why does this misgendering feel so bad? Center the joy. Yes.
And to look in the mirror and be like, fuck yes.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. How gorgeous am I today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think that's like a gorgeous way to end, although I've still got my 4 rapid fire sex questions, but like in terms of like our conversation, I think that's like a beautiful note to end on. And I hope that anyone listening, there we go. We're going to be leading with euphoria from now on.
Yes.
Okay, my 4 rapid fire sex questions before we wrap up are: number 1, what is your biggest sexual ick?
Biggest sexual ick is, I think, silence.
Oh, silent library. Okay.
Yeah. I need to know that what I'm doing is right.
We need a moan.
I need a moan here or there.
Listen, as someone who has sex with a lot of straight men, I'm like, boys, I need you to moan.
Vocalize, please.
I need to hear something. We can't be playing silent library in these parts.
Yeah, who was it who said just like blink twice if you like it?
Yes, Scotty.
Yeah.
Blink twice if you like it. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I can't have sex in silence.
That's a great one. You're like, can we put the music?
If you're not gonna make any noise, I at least need some beats. Yeah.
Amazing. Love that one. That's brilliant. Number 2 is, what is your biggest non-sexual turn on?
Brains.
Yeah.
Having a fantastic conversation.
A conversation. Yes, I agree. I'm the same.
Hearing someone be incredibly smart or just very good at their job.
Okay.
Competence, seeing someone do something very, very well.
Okay.
Which is very, very specific.
Yeah.
But like, to think of an example, this isn't a non-sexual turn on for me, but in this example, seeing a bartender do incredible things with their mixology,
Oh, yeah.
Being able to see the skill and the flair that goes into it. I have had lots of different jobs in my time, and seeing people work differently and seeing how the good ones do it.
Yeah.
There can be moments when you're like, oh, the way that you filed that stock report is just so good.
Listen, I love a talent crush as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love the non-sexual turn-ons. They're my favorite because I think one of my best friends ones was quick math.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you did those accounts real good.
I have a lot of respect for that. I think that it would in turn intimidate me, though, to see someone very, very good at maths, as I am so very, very bad at them.
Maths is my thing, so like I'm all about the maths. I was like, babe, does that mean I can turn you on? Because listen, I can give you some quick arithmetic.
I've got some 9 plus 10s over here, very, very quick.
My favorite thing when people learn that I have a maths degree is to then go like, what's 46 times 932? And I'm like, that a maths degree is not just times tables. It's not just like, I didn't do 3 years of just times tables getting higher and higher and higher. But yeah, brains. I mean, intelligent conversation for me, I'm with you, is number 1 because I can't stand small talk.
No.
Hence why I try and get people talking about their sex lives within about 30 seconds of meeting me. But
I respect
brains, intelligent conversation. We're here for it. Next question is, describe your sexual personality in 3 words.
Okay, vocal. Silly.
Love that.
Sticky. I think those are my 3 words.
I love silly. No one's I mean, no one said sticky either, but like I'm here, like I'm very here for silly, because if I can't laugh with someone in a sexual encounter, then why am I here?
Exactly. You've got to see that it's actually quite an absurd thing that you're doing.
Absolutely. Like sex is silly. Like what are we doing?
So silly.
We're just putting body parts in places and hoping for the best and just like seeing what we can get out of it. Like, like that might feel good. Like, sure, like put that in my ear and we'll just like see how it goes.
Exactly. So I love a bit of silliness.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if it's not like sex / a stand-up comedy routine, then what are we even doing?
Yeah.
And the last one is there anything on your sexual bucket list?
Depends on who I want hearing this episode.
Your partner's like, what are they gonna say?
Yeah, is this going to be news to me or yeah, okay, I've never done it in a field before, and that does intrigue me. But at the same time, it does disturb me. I think it could be the best and the worst thing, because I'm a big advocate of peeing after sex.
Yes, very necessary.
And I just think that after doing the do and then trying to pee in a field, I feel like that would be...
I think you're fine to pee in a field.
No, here we go.
People are peeing in fields all the time.
Yeah, here we go. I've got it.
Okay.
Sex on a haystack.
Okay.
That's on the bucket list.
Itchy,
awful. Kind of want to know what that's like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I love that. I love how specific these have been. And do you know what? Yeah. Do you know what sex on a haystack would be? Very silly.
So silly. Haystack, hay bale. Yeah, haystack. I'd go for haystack. That'd be way less firm than a hay bale. It's absolutely a romanticization of the country, being a city kid. That's what it is. That's why I've done this.
And we've seen some great sex in haystacks in films, I'm sure, over our lives.
Yeah, my brain's just going, I want that.
Yeah. Nice. I hope your partner hears it. Happy birthday.
I'll send this as a hint.
Just that we're going to the country for the weekend.
What's that I hear?
A weekend in the country we love. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. I mean, it's been so articulate and so informative. And, you know, anyone listening, trans community or ally, I hope that, you know, they've taken something to learn from it, or, you know, that helps them personally. But you've been unbelievable. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and letting us in to your world and your experience.
Thank you so much for having me. I have had a wonderful time.
I am very, very grateful to have you here. If you wouldn't mind just dropping your social media so that obviously we can keep updated on your wonderful play as it progresses, that would be amazing.
Yes. So I'm non-specific on Instagram. So that's non_specific.
Stunning.
I've had that handle since I was about 14 years old. And I should probably make a more professional one. But I can.
No, I love.
To do so.
No, we love it. We love
it's a non-binary move from 14-year-old me.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. That the fact that you had that at 14. It's telling.
It's a little bit of a clue, isn't it?
But make sure that you all check out the Instagram, and we're all going to stay updated with the play and make sure that we are there supporting you. And for the last time, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone listening.
Friends, lovers, listeners, thank you so much for listening today. And of course, thank you again to Radclyffe for such an insightful and thought-provoking conversation. And please do keep an eye out for future incarnations of their brilliant play, Sweet Testament Divine. It's a beautiful piece of work that truly deserves to be seen by a wider audience. I hope that you found this chat as eye-opening and inspiring as I have. Hearing the lived experiences of those in the transgender and non-binary communities is so important for us to build a more inclusive and caring society. As Radclyffe and I discussed, it is so important to lead with joy and celebration of our friends. But that doesn't mean the trans community as a whole isn't in need of grave support. And I do want to highlight a few statistics before we go, provided by Stonewall, which is a prominent LGBTQ+ charity, just so people can understand the injustice and disparities that are being faced by trans individuals. According to a study by Stonewall, almost half of trans people in the UK have attempted suicide at least once. More than 4 in 5 trans young people have self-harmed. 41% of trans people have experienced a hate crime or incident because of their gender identity in the past 12 months. 2 in 5 trans people adjust the way they dress because they fear discrimination or harassment. 62% of trans people said they have experienced negative treatment from healthcare staff because of their gender identity. 52% of trans workers have experienced discrimination or harassment at work. 36% of trans people have left a job due to the discrimination they faced. Nearly 2/3 of trans pupils are bullied for being trans in schools in the UK. Only 13% of trans pupils report that their school staff are supportive of trans students. And while there has been an increase in awareness and acceptance, significant portions of the UK public still hold misconceptions about transgender and non-binary individuals. About 33% of people believe that being transgender is a form of mental illness or influenced by society. So, we have a lot of work to do. Please keep educating yourselves. Please keep advocating and fighting for your friends in the trans and non-binary communities. And if anyone has anything spare during this Pride Month, I asked Radclyffe for some suggestions of charities that help individuals in these communities. I will drop the links in the show notes also. But Gendered Intelligence is a trans-led charity that works to educate on LGBTQ+ identities and improve the lives of trans people. And Mermaids, which supports trans, non-binary and gender-diverse children and young people. We all have different ways of being allies, and if you are in a position to be an ally financially, which I do completely appreciate isn't possible for everyone, please do consider donating to either of these charities this Pride Month, or any other month. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that we provided a safe space for you, whatever position you are listening from. And please, let's keep supporting and celebrating each other and embracing all the different wonderful things that make up our identities and make us whole, beautiful humans. Let's let people live. Happy Pride, everyone, and I will see you very soon. But for now, thanks for coming. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love.